Hey random strangers, how you going? It is so close to the end of the year and here we are sitting down again watching Haibane Renmei and just contemplating the existential crisis that everyone faces. So, times are good. I wanted to kick things off with this comment from Rafx5, who started watching Haibane Renmei as a kid, which I think is amazing because I wonder how I would have taken this show as a 5-year-old. I was most likely not as cynical about things as I am now. So Rafx5 wrote, I think this was the first anime I ever watched even before Pokemon. Again, amazing. I was probably around 5 to 8 years old at the time. I don't remember all of it, but the comment about how the Haibane are treated like children made me wonder if this show resonated with me at that age, because it seemed to be about growing up, going out and seeing life through different experiences, along with all these seemingly arbitrary rules. I think I'd always thought of the town as a magical place, as though a god had created it for the purpose of the Haibane doing some soul searching in it. Kind of like a spiritual resort, which the idea of I love. So I never really worried about how the Haibane are treated, but then again, I was a child. I can definitely see how it shaped my worldview now that you're explaining it in terms of philosophy. I love that. Thank you so much. I think, isn't it interesting how from another perspective, you can reach an entirely different interpretation of the whole setup of Glee and the rules and the Haibane Renmei. This idea of protection or of a retreat where people who still need to do some soul searching and some growing sounds perfectly reasonable to me. And I actually really like the positive connotations of it. So as someone who, when I started watching this show, had all these red flags popping up and alarm bells going off, I oddly can also see how from someone else in a completely different mindset or worldview, the Haibane Renmei aren't this evil, ominous organization out to exploit anyone. They could just be preserving this order so that people who are vulnerable can have the space to figure themselves out. Some big ideas came out of Haibane Renmei episodes 4 and 5. Ideas that, surprise, surprise, brought to mind some really deep existential questions. Questions like, why are we here? How do we make sense of the world? And what is our purpose in it? What if we don't feel like we're good enough? And also, to what extent does how we think about ourselves internally impact how the world presents itself to us externally? On that last one, BirdKeyor20 gave a really useful tip as to what kind of philosophical exploration that Haibane Renmei was inspired by. They wrote, Yoshitoshi Abe, creator of Haibane Renmei, took inspiration from a book by Haruki Murakami to create the anime. It's from the 80s and is called Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. The book is divided in 2 narratives. One is Hard-Boiled Wonderland, the sci-fi part, and the other is the End of the World, the surreal and virtual fantasy part. Haibane Renmei was influenced by the End of the World part. I didn't read it myself, but maybe the book can help understanding a little bit more of the ideas that the anime explores. First of all, I love the name Hard-Boiled Wonderland. I did look it up, and it sounds like a book really worth diving into for how it interrogates reality itself and how the mind can shape that reality. I think as we go further and further into Haibane Renmei, it will be important to keep in mind that the external world of Glee and the everyday activities that we see the Haibane engage in all the time, like their jobs, are ultimately pointing us towards thinking about what their internal emotional states are. So we've talked about this before, I think. It's fun to obsess about details like how they can't handle money or hypothesize about how such a restrictive system would work in the real world on real people. But at the end of the day, what I'm really feeling from watching this series is that all of these material things are just signposts for gauging how someone like Rakka sees herself and how she sees herself fit in. Is she confident in herself? Like, does she feel like she has a place in this world? And if not, why not? Like, is she happy? And if she's not happy, what is it about her own thinking that's preventing her from being so, or from being free? One of the things I love about Haibane is that it rewards close watching. Little details that seem insignificant at the time start to form a bigger picture when you connect the dots. So like random lines of dialogue and these strange dreams and very small character interactions, they all add up to start revealing who the Haibane might have been in their past lives and why they ended up in Glee, and maybe even what kind of inner demons they had to overcome or have to overcome in order to find peace. Episode 4 opened with Rakka's strange dream. It wasn't a pleasant one. She was wandering aimlessly through this very bleak fog, but then, of course, a crow swooped in and kind of locked eyes with her, and that seemed to jog a memory in Rakka, maybe something like from her past life. So was this dream a signal that Rakka is on the verge of remembering who she used to be? But before anything could happen, she was like jolted awake by this distant clanging, which just turned out to be Kana banging on a bucket to wake her up to start work at the ridiculous time of like 6:34 a.m. The clanging I thought sounded like the gong of a clock tower, you know, something that evokes the passage of time or of a time that's been long forgotten. Right here, when Rakka was trying to just cling to those last few precious moments of sleep, is when she was probably being the most relatable she has ever been. You know what? It is tough being a Haibane. We learn more about Kana's view of crows, which turned out to be more complicated than at first it seemed. She wasn't thrilled to see Rakka leaving food out for them, and she got angry at the crows for making a big mess of the trash before she chased them off with a broom. But when Rakka commented on how smart the crows were for figuring out how to undo the locks, interestingly, Kana didn't exactly disagree, only said that Rakka really shouldn't encourage the birds to become too dependent and therefore lose their ability to survive on their own. So to drive the point home, Kana burnt the remaining garbage so that the crows couldn't get at it anymore. This is where we really first start to interrogate the pros and cons of having someone to completely rely on. Because I asked, first question, like, would it be so bad to let the crows live on the town or in the town? But then crows, they seem to represent a kind of opposing ideal to the Haibane. They are free to come and go, to soar over the walls whenever they want. And meanwhile, the Haibane remain trapped or, depending on your perspective, confined within. So are the crows what the Haibane are meant to become one day, free to leave Glee by working through whatever is holding them back? It might sound nice being able to rely on others and not have to do any work yourself, but Kana recognizes that total dependence is also a dead end. If you never need to struggle to solve your own problems, to think for yourself, you stay trapped in this eternal state of arrested development. You never grow as a person and you figuratively are unable to spread your wings. Given Kana's drive to minimize her own dependence on the townspeople as much as possible, even as a Haibane, her tough love stance towards the crows makes more sense. She herself is grateful for the town's charity, but also wants to be self-reliant so that she's not an object of pity almost. And I think most people find that relatable. At a certain point in your life, you discover that you want to be free to make your own choices. But to do that, you have to grow up, which is why teenage, adolescent years are so awkward and frustrating, because you start to develop that desire to be independent, but at the same time, there are many ways in which you aren't and have to rely on your parents, say, or other people. So that's when you start to, you have to move out of home, you learn how to take responsibility for yourself, you take risks, and you will make mistakes. In doing so, you start to figure out who you are and what you really want out of life. There is freedom in defining yourself based on your own choices and your own efforts, instead of all of that stuff being defined by others. And I think Kana sees herself in and wants to be like the crows. That is the natural progression of being a human. So as a Haibane, they're kind of in that, again, weird in-between adolescent phase where they want to be free but they're also not, and there are all these restrictions on them. Maybe later in the story, Kana gets to a point where she can graduate from Glee and leaves the nest, so to speak. And I think if anyone had that drive, it would be her. Kana took Rakka up to the clock tower, and it looked very cool inside, you know, gears, pendulums, and all sorts of timekeeping contraptions. So she reveals that she's trying to fix this smaller device that had been modified by the previous resident, or a previous resident, to make the clock run electronically instead of with the pendulum. Nothing is really known about who this mysterious tinkerer was. All that's left are some of their notes. And we found out that Kana knows about all this because she was born in that same clock tower. What was most interesting to me was just how Kana lights up talking about her explorations of the clock tower. The fact that she wants to continue someone else's very mysterious work, I think also speaks volumes about her personality. She is curious, she's driven, and she finds purpose in solving puzzles. You know, like making things whole again. And she gets so caught up in her passion that sometimes she forgets that she has actual work to get to, which is sort of why I struggle to think of reasons for why Kana ended up in Glee. My working theory for why the Haibane are reborn into Glee is that they somehow need to rediscover their lost sense of self, or their self-esteem, or their lost purpose. Kana, though, as someone who seems very focused and self-assured, doesn't really seem to fit that mold. On the way to work, Kana biked so furiously that for a moment, when they leapt up into the air, it looked as if she was flying. And immediately following that, as if to say, don't miss that very important imagery, there was this focus shot on her wings as Rakka literally is yelling out, "We're flying!" And it really reinforced this feeling that I got that Kana's ambition might actually someday allow her to liberate herself from the town. Meanwhile, Rakka was terrified, and that bike ride just felt like a heavy metaphor for what it's like to face uncertainty and your fears head on. It is scary, but necessary if you want to get anywhere. In fact, on the way back to Old Home, when Rakka was the one doing the pedaling, she declined Kana's request to go faster because safety first. You know, it really highlighted Rakka's very risk-averse nature and really her behavior since arriving in Glee. She wants to follow the rules. She wants to fit in and be the model citizen or the model Haibane. But freedom, possibly in the form of finally getting beyond the town's walls and growing a character that is brave enough to do that, might require more appetite for risk. Her caution, I think, reveals a tension that we all face in some capacity in life. Should we carry living within our designated lane, or do we go off and blaze our own trail? I think conformity, you know, you should never turn your nose down on conformity, because it is the fact that conformity usually gives us security and a comforting routine and acceptance from others, but it also often can stifle personal growth. Independence, on the other hand, allows for self-determination, but it is also a lot less certain. So maybe the ideal is finding a healthy balance between the two. After all, independence doesn't mean becoming a complete hermit. You know, humans need community, and a byproduct of that is that we shape each other's identities in a lot of different ways, which is great. But there is definitely a balance to be found. We can nurture our self-sufficiency while also embracing relationships that support each other while not being overly suffocating. So for Rakka, though, the scales seem at the moment tipped too far towards safety, independence. So if she really wants to discover her true self, she may need to get comfortable with a little more risk-taking. At the top of the clock tower, as they gazed out over the town's walls, Kana said to Rakka, "If you can stand this view, then there's nothing that you'll be scared of." And looking down triggers like a vertigo, but you can overcome that fear by focusing on what lies ahead beyond the walls. So that scene read like a metaphor for personal anxiety, it highlighted Rakka's dilemma. Is she brave enough to pivot from focusing down on her fears towards envisioning a path beyond where she can overcome her own perceived weaknesses? When we obsess over the problem in front of us and our own flaws, fear can really paralyze us and we can end up collapsing in on ourselves. On the other hand, allowing ourselves to imagine what could be different lets us move ahead and grow. With the walls of Glee being the highest structures around, it's like they're this final challenge or a final frontier. They seem to stand in for whatever's preventing Rakka from finding freedom within herself, because she's asked several times now what is beyond those walls. And maybe what really limits her is not some external barrier like brick walls, but some inner mental blockade. So to find answers about her origin story and her place in the wider world, she has to go beyond what's familiar to her. Maybe it's literally going beyond the walls of Glee, but really it's an inner journey where she has to overcome whatever it is that is stopping her from realizing her true potential. The legend that says that the crows carry lost things from the Haibanes' past lives also implies that they have access to the world that the Haibane came from but cannot recall. Rakka clearly wants to understand her origins, so the birds represent a connection to those forgotten parts of herself too. And in order to access that forgotten part of herself, she's going to have to become more like a crow, in the sense that she's going to have to develop the confidence in herself to be more independent. When Rakka asked why the Haibane work just like everyone else, even though they don't earn wages to buy things, Kana initially gave kind of like a non-answer, like, well, because we have to. But that didn't really cut it. So Kana elaborated on how, yes, the townspeople are very protective of the Haibane, but to someone as fiercely independent as Kana, it leads to an uncomfortable sort of dependence. So she works to repay the townspeople so as to not feel like a freeloader. You know what's strange though? The Haibane never asked to be protected. The restrictions placed on them by the Haibane Renmei actually force them to rely on the townspeople anyway. Unlike the crows, who come and go as they please and are actively discouraged from relying on the townspeople for their survival. Because remember, like back when the communicator saw a crow and he kind of just tapped his staff to scare the crow away? I wonder, and I've been wondering this since the very beginning, why are the Haibane treated as especially vulnerable and essentially have their choice to be independent taken away or, at least discouraged? That rule that no one who leaves Glee is allowed to return, I think, crystallizes symbolically both the appeal and the anxiety around pursuing independence. On the one hand, once you leave, it probably means that you are entirely free and you don't need any more external help or refuge. You're completely independent. And that's a good thing. You no longer have to compromise your own autonomy. And for someone like Kana, they can thrive and pursue their own dreams to whatever degree that they want. On the other hand, there's a slight danger to not being allowed to return that gives even Kana pause, because self-reliance means you have to navigate unfamiliar terrain on your own, and all the previous safety nets that you had vanish. I feel like in this show, freedom is presented as an existential all or nothing bet. Humans and Haibane alike have to weigh whether claiming their freedom from Glee is worth the risk. And that's something that we explored more in the next episode when we met Sumika. But realistically, in real life, as we talked about before, most people aim for the middle ground. You do go off and do your own thing, but you also keep enough anchors to home or to familiar relationships so that you're not completely adrift and lonely in an uncertain world. When Kana jokingly warned Rakka not to become a useless freeloader, kind of foreshadowing the charcoal feathers that we met later, Rakka went into a sort of shock. You know, her worst fear, it turns out, is to be a burden to others. And even after Kana regretted her big mouth and backtracked, you could see that it really, really weighed on Rakka. And I feel that Rakka is the kind of person who carries an intense dread of being deadweight, even if it's not true. I mean, she is still very new in town, so it makes sense that she hasn't yet found a job that she can really take to, and she's still trying to get comfortable in her own skin. Plus, she has been helpful. So from my perspective, she's actually doing really well. Unfortunately, she is also the kind of person who can't help but compare themselves to others. So left unchecked, that guilt could consume her or potentially grow into something much worse. And I really, really felt for her in that moment. I mean, I feel for anyone who, like Rakka, constantly questions their worth and really struggles to see how they are actually very valuable just as they are. During this episode, we met Kana's tough but fair master at the clock shop, or the clock repair shop, I think it was. Kana and Rakka arrived late, so in a somewhat ironic rant, I thought, he went on about, like, who would buy a clock from a clockmaker who's always late, or clothes from a clothier in rags, or liquor from someone who doesn't drink. But Kana astutely pointed out that Haibane can't buy liquor anyway. Not to mention that the Haibane are also only allowed to wear used clothes. In fact, they are barred from any sort of commercial activity. And so you get the point that the master was trying to make. But it also just highlighted how the Haibane are prevented from participating in a lot of normal activities that humans can enjoy. Kana, right, was being told off for being late to a trade in which she will never be able to fully inhibit, in the sense that as a Haibane, she will never be allowed to become a clockmaker who can actually sell clocks. So for whatever reason, Kana's master didn't see the irony, or if he did, he just doesn't dwell on it. It was another one of those strange moments that made me go, but why? Why, or what is the purpose of these restrictions? And I do get that some kind of structure and rules, though arbitrary, are helpful for youth who are vulnerable, but being overly protective can also damage the identity building process and the skills building, like through a vocation, for instance, that is needed for becoming independent. The master's gruffness does hide a genuine care for Kana. It's like tough love. Kind of wonder maybe that's where Kana got it from. He sees her potential both as a clockmaker and probably in overcoming whatever circumstances caused her to be reborn as a Haibane in Glee. And he shows her kindness by providing the tools that Kana needed to fix the old home clock tower. Something that she has dreamed of doing for a long time. But then he very casually just mentioned an interesting rule, another rule, that townspeople shouldn't meddle too much in the Haibanes' lives. Now, I'm not sure if this is one of those set in stone rules or if it's just one of those unspoken social etiquette rules that everyone follows without having it being explicitly, proclaimed. But either way, it seems like just by enabling Kana's project, her independent, self-driven project, he may be overstepping some kind of line, which I also thought was weird. I'm assuming this sort of belief or rule was laid down by the Haibane Renmei again. So I am confused even more as to their intentions, even when I'm not really focusing on the material aspect of what that means in terms of vocation and money. It's like, do they want the Haibane to be self-sufficient or not? Maybe they make it intentionally difficult to attain a greater independence or freedom so that only the most motivated of Haibane, do become free or gain their independence. Then I'm like, but why put in place such hurdles to make it that much harder? I wasn't sure when the master worried about losing Kana, whether that confirmed that the Haibane can in fact leave Glee, or the other possibility is maybe he's just worried of Kana getting bored of her work there at the shop. However, if the Haibane can leave, I can also see why he would worry. Not only would he lose, a great apprentice, but Kana does seem eager for freedom and would do possibly a lot of things in order to earn that freedom. Unlike Rakka, when Rakka insisted that their wings are useless, it revealed that she can't envision them ever actually working or fulfilling their function. Now I can see, in this town, Haibane, though they appear as angelic beings, they are for all intents and purposes human. But metaphorically, it indicated that she still has quite a long way to go before she comes into her own true purpose and her individual potential. A part of her still blocks the idea of her ever attaining true freedom. On the ride back, Rakka was again struck by this sense of deja vu. It's not the first time. Her innate abilities to speak and bike ride imply that she did live a life somewhere before, and as a result, she felt this emotional tug towards a familiar place, and it made her happy, which I don't remember the last time we saw Rakka smile. It may have been like in episode 1 or 2. She has increasingly become really weighed down by this struggle to find her place in Glee. And just the fact that she remembered that she once belonged somewhere lifted Rakka's spirits. It also showed that Rakka does indeed have good memories from the past that are worth unearthing, or maybe it is worth trying to figure out if she can go back to her home. It might even suggest that she came to Glee not because her life before was a complete tragedy and a write-off, but to work through her mental blocks and how she perceives herself. Finally, in this episode, there was an interesting exchange between Reki and Nemu. Nemu was like showing off this lovely tea set that she had been gifted by some old dude that she did some research for at the library. And Reki couldn't resist but joke about how Nemu had abused her powers. And Nemu was rightly offended because she had worked hard for it, damn it. But importantly, Nemu was quick to say that the tea set was secondhand, so technically she hadn't broken any rules. Now, there is no explicit rule against the Haibane doing work in exchange for gifts, or rather not in exchange for. More, they help out, and then the townspeople give them things out of pure appreciation. For example, like Ku, he goes around to that cafe to help clean, and then they give him sugar cubes. It's like a show of gratitude. The Haibane just can't handle money. But the ultimate intent is that they shouldn't engage in transactional exchanges with the townspeople. Any gifts should be given freely and not as payment for services rendered. It seems, however, that sometimes these restrictions on the Haibane get skirted around a bit. And we saw it with Nemu here, and then later we saw Reki getting her fuel from another old townsperson. And it's just these small moments that peek through that hint at the friction between adhering to the very strict rules governing the Haibane, and then on the Haibane's side, them pushing for that little bit more independence, finding these loopholes, so to speak, so that they can function more as a normal human. So this line, like how far can the Haibane go before it's too far, is, I think, an intriguing tightrope that is emerging that I think definitely the older Haibane in particular learn to walk. Episode 5 focused on Rakka working with Nemu in the library. And I love libraries, so I was very happy to see the inside of one in Glee and what that's like. So we met Nemu's co-worker, Sumika, who is very heavily pregnant. And even though I'm pretty sure she won't appear again in the future, she still provided a very important perspective on life in Glee and on the Haibane. When Sumika was telling Nemu about her pregnancy, I just had a random thought. The oldest Haibane, like Reki and Nemu, they appear to be in their late teens. I suspect that they eventually leave Glee, which is why none of the Haibanes so far that we know of have appeared to be older adults. But what if a Haibane stayed in Glee indefinitely? Would they ever think to have kids? And if so, would it even be biologically possible? And even if it were biologically possible, the fact that the Haibane remain dependent on the townspeople by fiat, by law almost, that certainly would make it more difficult. Parenthood is unlikely given their eternal adolescent status. So I just thought that Sumika's pending motherhood represented another marker of being an adult that is forever out of reach for the Haibane. With Kana, it was this sense of discomfort at not being able to live a fully independent working life. And here it's literally the impossibility of becoming a parent. It's like the Haibane are stuck in this time capsule without a really clear guide on how to escape it. The conversation between Rakka and Sumika ultimately provided some insightful tips for Sumika. First off, there was that ridiculously steep slope that they had to haul a trolley full of books up. And as Sumika helped Rakka, she noted that Rakka doesn't really look much like a quote-unquote newborn. And Rakka was a little bit embarrassed by that. So it's worth dwelling on, I think, the implications of being called a newborn. The Haibane live with this childlike dependence, despite some of them physically looking like adolescents, at that stage where they really should be moving out and starting to look after themselves. And we know that not all of them are comfortable with being so dependent. So why? What did they do in their past lives that condemned them to being effectively infantilized? Maybe it was the fact that they lacked emotional maturity in some way, or maybe there is some unfinished inner work in their souls that meant they had to be trapped in these child bodies again. So Sumika's offhand comment and Rakka's subsequent embarrassment at being called out as a newborn highlighted the strangeness and, in a way, the frustration that permeates the Haibane's existence in Glee. The townspeople, what they see are these angelic kids needing their protection and their help. But the Haibane, I think, privately carry far more complex inner lives and thoughts and desires that aren't visible at first glance. They have these mindsets almost, or this potential that doesn't quite fit in with the whole being a kid that needs protection. In the end, Sumika thanked Rakka for unexpectedly reminding her that as a soon-to-be parent, being perfectly prepared matters less than the instinct to nurture and to protect. No one can predict the future, so rather than anxiously trying to anticipate every single contingency, Sumika can take comfort in the fact that she is already committed to caring for her unborn child, and then the rest will follow. Rakka's vague recollection of being protected was a reminder for Sumika that it's more important that she has that natural protective bond that you find between a parent and a child. Moving on, Rakka learned that all the books in the library were acquired through trade with the Toga and were all written in the outside world. They are so old that some of them crumble at just a touch, and I was like, oh, they really should be wearing protective gloves or something. Either there's nothing in those books that warrants a higher level of care, or, again, here's my tinfoil hat coming on again, the Haibane Renmei's aversion to outside knowledge getting into the town kind of fits with this very deliberate sort of neglect of books being the ultimate source of knowledge of the outside world. As Rakka labeled the books, one particular book caught her eye, and it was the one with the moon cover. And inside, it looked like it had images of Glee, but it's unlikely any of the books that they had within the vicinity had anything or any information about the outside world, because Sumika confirmed that she had once searched for a book like that, but failed. So my question here is, what are the Haibane Renmei so afraid of people learning? I know we've been calling it protection, and I think there is something to that. But it also does make you wonder what could be so dangerous about the world beyond the walls that not just the Haibane, but also the townspeople aren't allowed to go out. I wonder, is this the Haibane Renmei just extending their overprotectiveness to the entire town? It's just ironic, having an entire building full of books from the outside, and yet none of them contain any knowledge of the place that they were originally from. To some people, though, not having that knowledge about the outside world doesn't really matter. Case in point was Sumika. She once thought of leaving Glee to understand the beginning of the world, the why of it all. It's a line of inquiry that one could apply narrowly to Glee's origins, how it came to be and who built it, all the way to how the world came into being, and by extension, why humans exist. The urge to ask why is so universal. Why was I born in this place at this time? Why does any of this around me exist at all? On one level, comprehending the origins or the why of the world offers the possibility of insight into our purpose and our place within the cosmos. And in that sense, Sumika's desire to leave Glee, I think, reflects humanity's fundamental need to make order out of chaos and to situate itself within a wider meaning structure. And yet, Sumika ultimately accepts not knowing, finding that it's enough simply to live day to day on her own terms. For her, these big existential questions faded in importance when set next to the comfort and the simple joys of living in Glee. What do you guys think? Would the lack of any information about the outside world bother you, or is Sumika's outlook of appreciating life without worrying about the why of it all valid as well? Me, I think it is a personal decision for everyone to make for themselves, which seems like an easy out, but I think that's what I really think. By making peace with uncertainty, I think Sumika gained a kind of self-reliance. Her sense of self no longer depends on finding existential certainty. She may wonder every now and then about the origins of the universe or why Glee is here, but everyday life also offers enough meaning as is. Existence keeps you incredibly busy. You go to school, you grow up, you make friends, get a job, you meet someone, maybe even have kids, deal with life's dramas, and before you know it, that is your whole life. And it can be every bit as satisfying as choosing to pursue the truth with a capital T. The universe is bursting with mysteries that are far beyond human comprehension, even beyond the comprehension of the most genius of humans. So Sumika is like the model of someone who has accepted that eternal mystery and who also finds beauty in the not knowing. But for some who have a more restless spirit of inquiry and who can't ignore the search for answers, I mean, that's okay too. But maybe it's just a case of learning to seek answers patiently with an openness to uncertainty, to be able to live a life full of, wonder at this weird thing called life, and to not feel anxious at the fact that we don't have all the answers yet. Sumika's outlook evokes actually the existentialist philosophy of creating subjective meanings on your own terms instead of accepting existing explanations or explanations out there given by authority figures in government or religions for why the world is the way that it is. The key to freedom and to living a meaningful life is to choose for yourself what gives you the greatest sense of purpose and meaning. Just like how Sumika chose to make her life meaningful within Glee, she gave up chasing theories on the why of life in favor of simply dwelling inside the messiness of life and the uncertainty of it all. Instead of a book that's already finished and written by someone else, you start with a blank page and you're the one responsible for completing it. And that perspective really came into focus later when Rakka helped Nemu finish the story of the creation of the world. We saw Nemu, the storybook lady, in action, which was very cute. And I got this feeling that the tale that she read was symbolic in some way of the Haibanes situation, given how it was about a young man rescuing some kids and then returning them home. Although I do wonder who the bad wizard that was turned into a frog could be. Reki made an interesting comment about how the library's atmosphere has changed. Gone is the stuffy, sort of scholars-only environment. Now kids and casual visitors also feel welcome, and it's thanks to Nemu and the staff. And I couldn't help kind of adding in my head, I highly doubt that the Haibane Renmei had any hand in that effort. They just don't seem keen on facilitating broader access to knowledge because it's really not in their interest to have people become more curious about the outside world, should they then get funny ideas in their head that maybe they should leave Glee to find out what's out there. A welcoming library, I imagine, would run counter to their desire to keep the people secluded within Glee's walls. The question still, though, and I have asked this continuously this whole time, is why? You would think that restricting knowledge and thought like that would risk some degree of resentment, at least for some significant minority of the population, right? The human mind, I believe, naturally seeks to expand in understanding. I wonder if, in the apparent tranquility of the world of Glee, whether the Haibane Renmei had to deal with rebellious elements. I mean, we know that people like the charcoal feathers exist, but they seem to be more a group of juvenile delinquents just chafing at the rules that they have to follow. So I wonder, and again, I don't think this will ever appear in this series because it's just too, again, materialistic. But I do wonder if in this world, there has ever been some serious underground organization whose purpose was to subvert this imposed, insulated living. A key part of this episode was an investigation into the beginning of the world. Nemu wanted to give Sumika a gift before she left on maternity leave, and Rakka offered to help her. And the gift, of course, was related to finding out the story of the beginning of the world, which was literally the title of the book that has been lost due to terrible book preservation techniques, I can only imagine, and which contained only a few pages of a version of the creation story. And it used to be that Sumika and Nemu tried coming up with an ending for that story. And in doing so, really they just mirror millions, billions of people throughout history who have told numerous different creation stories, often in an attempt to make sense of the chaos of human existence. Creation myths offer comfort amid mystery and a disorientation that a lot of people feel upon finding out that they are a speck of dust on this spinning planet in this magnificent universe that no one really knows the full mysteries of. Creation myths are also used often to speak about universal experiences, universal human experiences of feeling like you don't belong, or of the process of finding where you belong. The stories that are told say as much or even more about the storytellers themselves than anything else. Maybe Sumika and Nemu sought understanding that would perhaps give them some sense of control over their destinies in Glee. And that same impulse endures in Rakka, who became absorbed in researching the beginning of the world, just like Nemu had done when she first started working at the library. In this flashback, we saw a younger Nemu crying as Sumika comforted her, and it's not clear why she's crying, but her visible despair echoes Rakka's current trajectory of starting to feel a bit lost and alienated in Glee. Nemu may very well have experienced a similar crisis of existential depression at some point. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if each of the Haibane did. Again, just reminding us that it is not easy being a Haibane whose past has been entirely erased and who now has to deal with the uneasiness of being in a vulnerable and a dependent state. So we got to the creation story. It's very similar to various creation stories from different cultures and time periods. It started with nothingness, then God appears and brings light to the nothingness or the darkness. But there are gaps in the story and ultimately a missing ending, which leads to the most important allegorical point in this episode, maybe even in the whole series so far, that it is up to the individual to come up with the rest of the missing story. Everyone has their own beliefs about the beginning of the world, if there even was one, which then underpins what they think is the reason for their very existence, which in turn critically influences how they conceive of their own identity and their value. In short, what this episode hammered home really strongly is that our beliefs about our origins deeply color our sense of significance and of direction. Origin stories conjure archetypes and attribute certain fated trajectories based on how we supposedly came into the world. And that's why this act of consciously questioning or even entirely reinventing origin stories can be so crucial to your identity and how confident you are or how much you believe that you even have a purpose in life. Nemu finished her story and importantly incorporated whatever Rakka suggested into it so that this ending that we then see in full at the end of the episode was just as much Rakka's story as her own. By reworking this old lost story, they also in a way reinvented its significance to their own lives and maybe even found some comfort in its retelling. As told by Nemu, God isn't perfect in this world. He makes mistakes. First, he accidentally made mountains and valleys because when he split the world into sky and land, the lines weren't perfectly straight. And then God just went, meh. Another mistake that he made was when he created beings like himself, which is also like it's a common creation story feature. What was odd though is that these creations were seen as failures because they were too similar to himself. So to differentiate these creations from himself, God gave them charcoal wings and halos, obviously the Haibane, and then he tucked them away at the back of his head, almost suggesting that he wanted them out of sight, out of mind, which aligns really with how the Haibane are kids who sadly have been forgotten by everyone who ever knew them, and on a more deeper level reflects Nemu's sense of not being valuable enough for someone to even acknowledge their existence. Let's pause here for a sec. Why would creatures too familiar to God or too similar to God be considered mistakes? I thought that maybe their extreme likeness challenged God's uniqueness and therefore authority, but then that just makes God sound like an insecure narcissist. Who knows, maybe in Nemu's version he is. Maybe they were mistakes because they were too perfect. Humans are meant to be defined by imperfection or by their relative powerlessness compared to an omnipotent godlike being. So maybe God here perceived danger in making beings that possessed both the power, the divine power that he had, and also the free will to make their own choices. So whatever the reason, it's highly symbolic that Nemu specifically conceives of the Haibane as mistakes, unlike the humans who came afterwards, who God considered as perfect. So there's an uncomfortable sense of the story being told from the point of view of someone who sees themselves as worthless almost, and who is greatly depressed by this. There's also a sense of envying humans. It feels like Nemu is projecting shame or has internalized some sort of external messaging, whether actual or perceived, that the Haibane are these unwanted anomalies that don't fit into the order of the world. Even to their creator, the Haibane are rejected for being neither one thing or the other. They're human and yet they're not human. They exist in this world and yet have memories of a lost former life. Clearly, that sense of rejection really did a number on Nemu's self-worth. Feeling like a mistake suggests that she is still haunted by her present limbo in Glee. Something fascinating that I missed the first time around, and which some of you mentioned in the comments, is that the story started being told in Nemu's voice, but then is picked up halfway by Rakka. So this next part was where Rakka's voice took over. So we can guess this is the part that she helped Nemu come up with. God fell asleep, which allowed the Haibane to escape from the back of his head. And God, seeing that the Haibane were already out in the world and floating around, kind of, again, just shrugged his shoulders and let them be. And that is Rakka's explanation for Glee. Like, it's a town where Haibane are allowed to exist in this ambiguous state where they're not really part of the world, but not apart from it either. What struck me about how Rakka turned the story around was this pivot towards God's compassion and his being tolerant of mistakes. You know, if he tolerated his other botched creations like the mountains and the valleys, why wouldn't he also accept the Haibane, even if they were mistakes? So the gist of Rakka's retelling is that flawed beings can still flourish, even, being mistakes. They can still shine in their own way. Contrast that to Nemu's much darker vision that doesn't really allow for mistakes like her to exist. Even though God tolerates some mistakes, Haibane are uniquely undeserving of that same tolerance. And I think it reflected the mindset of someone with very low self-esteem, someone who is quick to downplay their own qualities and judges themselves to be inferior to others, even though there's every reason to believe that that's not true. And it really makes you wonder what Nemu went through to get to that point of where she has this inner voice constantly telling her that she is not good enough. But also, it's sad because it's not uncommon. There are people who similarly, in a sense, quarantine themselves or parts of themselves from experiencing compassion or any sort of acceptance or self-acceptance. So what was really touching about Rakka's part of the story is that it offered this gentle pathway back to self-acceptance. It actually gave permission for Nemu to be the imperfect being that she is, and saw her, they recognized her as being who she is, and was like, you're okay. So this next part, Rakka and Nemu caught Reki sneaking off somewhere, so they followed, and it looked like she was buying gas from a random old dude. And it felt like it was conducted almost in secret, almost as if this isn't really above board, a townsperson exchanging goods with a Haibane. So yeah, we've talked about how Haibane are forbidden from handling money. And back when Nemu scored a teapot for work, Reki jokingly alluded to corruption. But as we said, again, the older Haibane really flirt with the lines and tend to barter quite regularly, it seems, and some townspeople just happily oblige them. Right after this exchange, a bunch of deadbeats called the Charcoal Feathers rolled up on their scooters in like a T-bird formation. Surprisingly, all of them also Haibane. Hyoko, the leader, sauntered up to Reki, and as juvenile delinquents will do, they kind of just all egged him on. Hyoko turned out to be a bit of a douchebag, as evidenced by when he grabbed Reki's cigarette from her mouth and yelled at her for smoking and for riding a bike around. Clearly, these kids fancy themselves as the rebel misfits, probably claiming these behaviors as their turf alone, while Haibane, or the ones who live in old home, are the ones who are prissy and follow the rules, and like Reki, are sellouts. So you shouldn't pretend like you're anything else other than a sellout. You know, you're either in or you're out. But Reki pretty quickly put Hyoko in his place, saying that she has permission from the town, which I thought was very interesting, and that what she's doing is perfectly legal. Essentially, their outcast status of the charcoal feathers doesn't give them any special authority to police others' actions. She then kind of snapped the string on his cap and revealed the halo that he was hiding underneath it. Also, his wings just suddenly came out from under his jacket, almost as if that's what happens when they get surprised. So Hyoko definitely lost a lot of his cool factor, but it also told us that for some reason, the charcoal feathers are trying to hide their identities as the Haibanes. So I can only assume that the way that they conduct themselves, they want to fit in to the human world as much as possible by flouting all the rules that apply specifically to the Haibane. And they don't believe in, say, Reki's choice of, you know, submitting to the Haibane Renmei's order, but also finding small ways in which she can also be more independent and enjoy these little pleasures in life. The charcoal feathers seem to represent a subversion of the values of true independence and freedom that Haibane like Kana aspire to within the confines of Glee. Their rebellious or defiant antics feel like a kind of shallow imitation of what authentic self-determination should be. So on the surface, the charcoal feathers reject the system by flouting the rules and embracing risky behaviors like smoking and joyriding and hiding their Haibane identity, but they seem more motivated by a desire to look good in front of their peers rather than any sort of self-directed purpose or motivation. Their freedom relies on kind of like external validation. You know, look at me, look at how free I am and how I'm not restricted by these rules. By contrast, Kana's drive for self-improvement comes from within. You know, she's learning valuable skills at the clock repair shop that can actually contribute to society. And she's giving back in that way and slowly building up her independence within the confines that way. In short, the charcoal feathers are really just angsty teenagers still trying to find themselves. Unsurprisingly, Reki also used to be a troubled youth herself, and Hyoko turned out to be someone that she ran away with a very long time ago after she and Nemu had a falling out, and they have been kept separate ever since by order of the powers that be. The question is, why did Reki go back to Old Home? Was she forced back, or did she just realize that she wanted to remain in the good graces of the town? Maybe she was forced to come back, but then grew up and just realized that the charcoal feathers were, you know, kind of losers after all. That wasn't the way to really truly attain freedom or independence. Either way, she matured with the wisdom that allows her now to walk a much healthier middle road. Neither full unquestioning obedience to the system, but nor is she defiant in this sort of non-productive rebellion. Something in between is where Reki is, and that kind of feels just about right. Wasn't it interesting that Nemu was envious of the charcoal feathers for being a co-ed group? It sparks questions of why is Old Home only a home with girls in it, you know, plus a few, I think, male young feathers? I don't think we know for sure. Is it this dated assumption that boys are more prone to distraction and trouble? Or are these very old stereotypes that single-sex schools offer better discipline versus like the looser morals of public school life? You know, those stereotypes don't hold true, but there is a clear distinction between the feathers who stay at Old Home and then those running on the streets. It kind of makes you think whether the charcoal feathers deserve some kind of sympathy instead of an old home or like a warm kind of haven. They're living in something called like an old abandoned factory, which evokes something that's really gritty and not welcoming at all. Maybe their bad behavior caused the charcoal feathers to have their privileges of, protection revoked, and they have to survive on much less resources or by their own street smarts. But maybe any degree of freedom makes that loss worth it, which is, what would explain why Nemu seems a little bit enamored with the idea of a co-ed existence. She seems to romanticize the glamour of the street life that lies beyond the disciplined and sort of very rules-based walls of old home. Rakka's own interest in Reki's teen rebel years reminded us that she herself doesn't feel like she fits into old home yet either, despite her best efforts. In the next scene, we saw how she still feels like she belongs somewhere else, despite everyone else telling her that that's not the case. Does her old life, her parents, the town that she used to live in, still exist somewhere? It's a sense of displacement that we've seen her regularly experience since the beginning. There is a hope that maybe this is just a phase that she's going through, that once she gets used to her body and her life as a Haibane, that she'll feel right at home and maybe start asking all these questions and doubting whether she belongs. I am not so sure if acceptance will just come naturally with time. Maybe what she really needs is to go through some kind of honest reckoning, instead of just waiting to acclimatize to Glee without really doing any sort of soul searching. Or maybe the ultimate lesson is that it doesn't matter. As long as you make choices that don't suppress who you are, or you choose the path that you feel is best for yourself. No one else can choose for you. Maybe she'll learn from Sumika, who was like, just put her hands up and was like, I'm done with asking all these existential angst type of questions. I just want to focus on my life here and make the most of what I have here. Either way is fine. I just feel like, again, Rakka is on the cusp of making that decision for herself. And it's so uncomfortable watching her as she journeys through this process, because it really reflects what we all face as we grow and as we go through life. It's like, do we focus on the present and just enjoy life as is, or do we really need to put more of an effort into figuring out who we are and what we're meant to be doing in this life? What's sad about Rakka's situation is, because she can't contribute to society as expected due to not finding a job that she likes, she's starting to doubt whether she deserves to be happy. Oh man, a sense of belonging is so important to well-being. People who lack a sense of belonging and purpose, the research shows, are more susceptible to depression and anxiety, and in some cases like suicide. And worryingly, it seems like Rakka is slipping into that mindset where, because she's not like the others or doesn't seem as well adjusted as them, she does also seem to forget that she hasn't been in old home for as long as the others have, that she's not as good as them. And this is where I really, really wish that old home had a professional therapist living there, someone that she could talk to. Because again, just going back to research, studies show that even if you have a strong social support network, for example, you have a lot of friends or you socialize with friends all the time, if you don't feel a sense of belonging, you are still susceptible to becoming depressed. That is the critical importance of having an internal state of mind that knows who you are and is comfortable with that. So Rakka, despite being helped by and surrounded by the other Haibane who have been kind to her and have included her and accepted her, it still feels like she is on this downhill, progression towards depression. And finally, just before we dive into the episodes themselves, there is definitely something weird going on with Ku. Like, there were these extended scenes of him saying goodbye to the cafe owner and then that stray cat, and these long shots of him just being very contemplative, like he knows that something's going to happen soon. So, I don't know. Here we go, guys. Episode 6 of Haibane Renmei in 3, 2, 1, play. Huh. Never noticed that shooting star before. Ku, of course, is the one who wants to chase it. Oh, that's Rakka coming down. I find those drums and that tambourine really adds to the folksy feel of this show. You know, the fact that they're in a very small, isolated town. Loss and rain. She's looking for a new Haibane. Oh, a new room for Reki. Oh, a room for herself. Sorry. Forgot she's still living in the guest room. Guess that's another sign for settling in. Who's such a cutie? Isn't that just a foreshadowing of everything we've been talking about? Having to make effort so that you start to get somewhere, not relying on everyone else. Yeah. What does Q do? Ah, oh, hey, the halo. The halo is like fading. No. I mean, maybe that's a good thing. Just bring the fry pan out as well. Oh my god, just permanent gonging. Just the fact that she didn't even think that this would be annoying. You know what? I'm just reading so much into these lines that they just casually throw off. It's like at least this clock is doing what it was meant to be doing. Oh, so maybe the person that's most likely to leave is actually Ku, not Kana. Huh. I mean, well, that's Rakka now. This is exactly the space that Rakka is in. It's trying to be as well adjusted as them. But what does that mean? Does Ku just become human and can move out of old home? Is that Ku's old room? Just seems like she's giving everything away in preparation for something. Um, who has been furnishing it all? Has Ku been doing this the whole time? Reki was mad. Lol. Why? Does Ku know that's happening? She's gotta feel something, right? Oh, okay, she's still physically there. Oh, that's so sweet. I think it's because Kui was able to help Rakka in her own way. And that gave her a bit more confidence that she isn't just some helpless little kid that's useless. I don't know why. I feel like that's the last time we're ever gonna see Kui. But where do they go? Okay. Oh, all these little jokes they make about Kui being a bit of a disaster. And she's actually, I think, gone now. And none of them suspect that Kui was just bit by bit trying to make it so that she can leave. Ah, Rakka asking some great questions again. What was she going to say? Is that she's like, but that doesn't sound right either. You can't be protected from everything. Like, if you're protected from everything, then you don't learn or grow or struggle. Birds are just fine in the storm. They are the ones who aren't protected, but they're doing fine. Hey, what did it say to her? Yep. That that was cool, wasn't it? I see how the others kind of dismiss her feelings, and they're kind of just like, oh, nothing's happening, no, you don't have your past life doesn't exist anymore, just come back inside. depressed. Change. Change isn't always necessary, pleasant, but it's necessary. Yes, the only one who seems concerned or who is even considering the possibility that Ku may not come back is Rakka. He's the only one who is like, something's not right. Surely a Haibane has left them before. Maybe they're just like, it's just normal for some of us to leave in that way. There are walls that are most powerful. Oh yeah, okay. They all know. They all know. What does that mean? Do they go back to their old place? Oh, they have a name for a day of flight. Okay. Maybe they just go back to heaven. Because their wings finally work. A point of reference. She has. Oh. It just annoyed the townspeople as well. So the western woods are near the walls, not out of the walls. I guess because once you go out, you can't come back. I wonder why they don't talk about it. Maybe it's because they each have to figure out the way that they become able to fly. They're so close to that big ass wall. And now she's giving her more literal drops, except they're tears. The thing is, they don't know that whether or not it's a good thing. I mean, to us, it's like, it is good because obviously Q was ready to go and wanted to go. But to them, it's like, well, we don't know exactly what happens or why it happens. Because no one who's gone through the process has ever spoken about it. To them, it might just be something incredibly tragic that's just taken in an instant with no warning, which is pretty scary. Ugh, it's like they're in like grieving clothes. Oh, this I feel is the episode where everything suddenly makes a sharp turn towards the dark, you know? Let's talk about that very last line. Reki being like, everyone leaves me in the end. I feel that's probably the first time where we have really gotten a peek into why it is that Reki has been stuck in Glee this whole time as well. If we're going to roll with the theory that the Haibane each have something inside them that they feel they're lacking, or you know, that prevents them from really stepping out into the unknown and makes them scared, that's Reki's, I guess. I don't know what you call it, just this dark cloud that's hovering over her, the fact that she's scared of people leaving her. I guess there's something really unhealthy about how she said that. Like maybe it's her fault that they leave, or this inability to accept that in life things just happen. I know that I, like before watching this episode, I was going on and on about how it was going to be Kana to leave because of her drive and her self-motivation. But it makes sense the way that felt like they sprung this readiness for Ku to leave on us in this episode. And though it happened really quickly, it also didn't feel like a total surprise. It made sense that Ku, because of her relative small size, the fact that, you know how they showed all the shots of her trying to wear Hikari's glasses and ride Reki's scooter and failing miserably at those things, just trying to be like the older Haibane and not feeling that she was useful in any way, shape or form. but trying really hard and getting nowhere. It makes sense that though she may have started out like a bit of a helpless little kid, that was exactly the thing that fueled her fire for becoming inch by inch, little by little, that much more confident, that much more developing her sense of usefulness, her sense of purpose. And in the end, she left one step ahead of all of them. The fact that Rakka was the one who gave Ku the final few last drops of that cup that she was talking about that was slowly and slowly filling up was also really sweet, well, bittersweet, because we know that Rakka is just going to be totally wrecked by Ku leaving. I think the two of them had a connection because Rakka herself feels like she was in the same position that Ku was in when they first started out in Glee, just trying to find their place, really struggling to, feeling like the others are way ahead of her in terms of having jobs that they like and just being really well adjusted to old home. So I'm not quite sure how Rakka is going to react exactly to this disappearance of her friend, but it doesn't seem like it's gonna be great. When she saw the halo and the remaining feathers of Ku, it was almost as if she was dealing with a death, a loss, literally the title of the episode, of someone that she'd come to really care about. To us watching this on the outside and seeing all of the existential meanings that lay behind, you know, slowly building up your self-confidence and your sense of purpose and then finally being free, which is what I think the disappearance of Ku means, that's a positive thing. But it's only positive if you see all of that meaning behind what's happened to the Haibane who are still in Glee and who know nothing about what it means to lose your halo and what it means to be consumed by light and go back to the sky, and the symbolism that the crows have. So Ku was probably left surrounded by all the crows that were there, to kind of say, hey, you know, welcome to the crew. You know, you're finally free now. Your wings finally work like ours do. And you can finally, your soul is set free from this town, in the sense that you don't have to be protected anymore because you have finally found your own sense of purpose, you know, your reason for your existence. But yeah, it just felt like to the Haibane, it's a real loss, and it's incredibly daunting that they could be taken at any moment like that. Of the same event, you can look at it from two such different perspectives, and I really actually feel for Rakka. Also, back to Reki again, she obviously doesn't see it as a good thing either. She has been through this before, being one of the older Haibane, and interestingly, charcoal feathers, that's their name. I thought it was the name of the bunch of juvenile delinquents that we met last episode, but I think they're all charcoal feathers. Yeah, I was a little bit confused by that. But it just seems like charcoal feathers is a catch-all term for Haibane who haven't left Glee yet. To Reki, the fact that what she took away from Ku's disappearance is that everyone leaves her is such a negative take on the whole situation. To her, it would be ideal if everything just stays the same. Everyone stays where they are. They all make a life within the walls of Glee and within Old Home, and nothing changes. That still seems to be Reki's ideal. And while that may seem idyllic, it really, when you pierce down through to what that means for her ability to accept change, as a human, if you're not able to deal with change, you're going to have a real struggle with life, because life is all about things changing constantly and learning to adapt and to really grow as part of that changing process. So yeah, and I feel it's bittersweet. I would say that episode gave me, yeah, there's a lot to think about. I'm most curious to see how Rakka and Reki pick themselves up after this incident. They're probably going to go through some major identity crises. So here we go, episode 7 in 3, 2, 1, play. She already looks like she's spiraling. Also, this was the room that Ku recommended to her too, so it's just reminders all around of what she's lost. Uh, this really is, in a sense, a death, isn't it? That's all the things that people say, right? When you lose someone, it's like, I'm sure you'll see them again. You know, they wouldn't be happy knowing that you're so upset. You know, they'd want you to move on with life. No one really knows for sure what happens in the afterlife or post death. But these are things that we say to ourselves and to each other to make it more bearable. So that was the last of Ku, and we're only ever going to see them in this OP from now. Gotta say, I am a bit sad. I do understand why it would be so devastating. That in that shot, it almost looked as if Hikari was flying. Also, it's like the ones who you least expect are the ones who are most ready, you know, to go. Scar, illness, arrival of winter. Also, remember how they were talking about how winter just suddenly sneaks up on you? Just more double meaning there. He was probably referring to them going as well. Oh no. That's turning black. And I know, I feel like she should just let it out. Don't do any more suppression of emotions. That's not healthy either. Her room looks. Oh man, she's preserving Ku's room as it is. She keeps looking at her hand. They've made a statue in commemoration of Ku. Oh, that is not great. Nope. I mean, all of these things that she's doing, like talking to the person she's lost, keeping their room as it is on the day they died or went away, they're kind of normal things to do in the grieving process, but I feel like she's not found a way to get out of it, to get out of that downward spiral. Clearly, it's having some effect on her feathers. Is this the cafe that Ku used to help out at? I mean, it's just non-binary. Okay, so even that the townspeople are familiar with the process, they don't freak out when one of the Haibane leave. She's gonna feel bad about this because it's like I'm still stuck here, relying on the townspeople's charity. Yeah, it is tough when you're dealing with this massive loss and to everyone else around you. The people at Old Home, the townspeople, it's like nothing. Oh no! Oh no, I was just gonna get like snapped up by Hyoko. Look at this gang rivalry that they're trying to stir up. Okay. Because I'm ice cold. Oh my goodness. Okay. He just totally gets better as Reki, obviously. At least he has the decency to feel bad. Our obligatory close up shot of the free birds. Just a reminder of Rakka's unfreedom. Yeah, they were all back to normal, except potentially Reki. She just suppresses everything as well. So, Kana. Not surprised that Kana is also very adaptable. The one who just is able to move on. I mean, could she write another story with Nevo? Just to explain what happens when Haibane leaves, to make it something more positive. Oh no. Oh no. Oh. Oh wait, is this gonna make a really, really dark turn? She's gonna try and cut her wings off or something worse. Mm. Say like me. Okay, okay. Okay, she's fine. Fine. Wing covers? That's right, they mentioned it at the beginning. Maybe it'll give her something to do. You know, sometimes that's what it takes. Just having something to occupy your time until it passes. Wait, Reki's the only one who saw that. Yeah, the more she thinks about kids, the more she turns black. Oh, those ominous piano chords. Ooh, that oh, she got off a lot. How is Reki gonna help her when she herself is also going through some shit? I mean, she clearly is in a mental state that requires a therapist. When you have mental health issues, it's true you have not done anything wrong. It's not your fault. That's just how um, we can get sometimes. We can sink into these states, right, where we're really not healthy. But it's okay to reach out for help. Hmm. She's been there. Sinbound. Her wings are pretty much the same color as well. Oh. Wait, but she does remember it now. The whole walking on the pathway in the moonlight. Kuramori. Yeah, it is interesting though that her wings aren't black spotted anymore, but yet she retains that mental state of being born wrong. maybe Nemi made it up. Just for Reki's sake, because she could see Reki sinking into this terrible state of depression. Oh, okay, okay. A community watch. Okay, so she's trying. She's trying to remember. It's the moon. A blood moon. Okay. Isn't it interesting how we are way past the halfway mark in this series, and yet that is still the question that remains: is we still don't know exactly how the Haibane came to be where they are. And I guess that's the appeal of this series. It keeps you constantly guessing. It gives you slightly more clues every episode that allows you to refine your idea of why the Haibane are there, but it doesn't give you the full picture. Every episode now is just getting sadder and sadder. What was okay? So with Reki, uh, actually, wait, we'll put that aside first. First of all, I gotta get a little bit of a oh no, where are we going with this? When we got these little signs that Rakka is sinking into a deep black hole of depression. We saw when she flicked the frog over that Ku had made to represent her, and it was just like lying on its back, like it was dead. And then when they focused on the scissors, as she looked at those scissors before she snipped off her wings, it was like, oh man, this is going somewhere really, really dark, because it felt like they were hinting at this idea of self-harm, being so unhappy with yourself and not knowing what to do and suffering already from a loss, that the only way you see out is to harm yourself. And I it was dark. It was dark. When Reki's wings started spreading those black spots, it really was an external expression of what was going on internally, her inner turmoil and her depression. You didn't need to see those black spots to know that it had already been a full month since Ku had gone, and yet she was still tending to Ku's room, talking to Ku as if she was still there, and unable to go on without breaking down into tears. I'm not in any way, shape, or form a professional psychiatrist, so I can't speak to the clinical symptoms of depression, but I have known some friends who have gone through depression, and depression that lasts not for weeks but like years. And it's the hardest thing to have to go through as a human being. And as someone who has a friend with depression, there's no set way or that for every person it's different, right? They experience this depression on their own terms. All you can really do is just be there for them, offer them opportunities to talk. Don't be afraid of them. When Reki was telling us about her story and how she was born with black wings, so she is just the kind of person who is susceptible to depression, people were scared of her, except for that one girl, Kura Mori, I think her name was. So this idea of when you have a friend who is depressed, it's important to let them know that you're there for them, that, like, I see you, I see that you're in pain, and I'm here if ever you need someone to express that pain to. And that's why I appreciated Reki reaching out to Rakka in that way, reassuring her that the fact that her wings are turning black isn't because of something that she did wrong. It's not her fault. And also metaphorically, that this mental health black hole that you're just struggling with every day is also not her fault, that it is normal and completely common to experience this sense of darkness after having experienced something traumatic like losing a friend, or generally being in a stressful, uncertain situation where you have to figure yourself out from scratch. On another level, Reki herself is also struggling through some really, I didn't even know how to describe it, just some really intractable mental problems that, to be honest, no one around her really is equipped to help her with. She is the oldest one there. She is aware of all of the legends and stuff that are helpful for the Haibane to know about, so that they can make some sense of this mysterious world. But it seems like when she was talking about being born sin-bound, so being born with black spotty feathers, that she was doomed for all time to be stuck in Glee. It was interesting that she acknowledged that there are Haibane who are born who can live happily in this town, and then they graduate on to life outside of Glee. So that sounds like a healthy pathway that a Haibane can take. But for herself, she doesn't see that pathway out of Glee, which is odd because from what I'm seeing, her feathers are no longer spotted black, which is a good sign, right? She is taking initiative to help out in old homes. She teaches and looks after the younger kids. She seems to be doing her hardest to paint and to recall the memories of the dream that she had in the cocoon. So she's doing everything right, and yet there is a sense that she is defeated and sees no path out for her because of the circumstances of her birth. And that's something that I would really love to hear your guys' opinions on. It seems to be hinting at or representing the state of mind that some people can get into, where they write themselves off from the very beginning. It's a mental illness that some people struggle with, where they cannot see or feel any sense of value. Going back to when Reki was sad over the fact that everyone leaves her, the crux of the problem, or at least a part of it, seems to be that her entire self-worth seems to be built on the external validation that others give her. And that always leads to a dead end, because there is not a single person, no matter how good they are, your partner or your closest friends or your family, no one can ever give you this sense of self-worth that you deserve. Only you can give yourself that. It sounds like such a cliche, like, you know, you can't love others unless you love yourself, but it's a truism that is true. I'm sure there are a lot of symbolisms that I'll have to go back and pick up on in more detail, but until the next time, I would really like to hear the main takeaways that you guys got from these 2 episodes. Haibane Renmei is so understated in the way that it's set up this world, such that when they do start going into these darker topics and the states of mind that people can find themselves in and see no way out of, it was, I would say, kind of masterful, the way that they just hit us with these such raw emotions. And yes, it occurs in a fantastical world with angelic beings and, you know, mysterious woods and crows that can talk to you, but in some sense it reminds me of kind of like post-impressionistic art, where they use blurry images or ways that seem vague in order to bring out truths, human truths, more clearly. So it's that irony, I guess, that I feel from this show, which is really cool. But yeah, that's enough of my ranting today. Guys, I really hope you have a good rest of the week or month, depending on when the next video is. And thanks for dropping by again. I really enjoy having these sorts of discussions, and I hope you got something out of them as well. So until then, see you next time.